alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a host, a guest, sorry, not a host, a guest who's new to this podcast, but probably not new, well, not exactly new to me, but probably not new to a lot of you. You will probably have seen him if you're on Twitter, and you follow me anyway, and you'll also have seen his short stories out there in the world. John Wiswell, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Tim. Yes, I'm John Wiswell. I am a writer of largely weird fiction, usually science fiction or fantasy or horror that just like veers all the way over into warm-hearted, nice things. You probably, if you've read my work, you probably have read Open House on Haunted Hill, which is the story about what if a haunted house was nice and just really wanted somebody to come live in it. That was recently nominated for the Locust Award and the Nebula Award for Best Short Story. I'm the author of other things like Tank, about a really nice tank that tries to make friends with other people. And Silhouette Against Armageddon, about a really cranky skeleton that thinks somebody's trying to break into his coffin. I tend to write stories about strange protagonists from a very sympathetic point of view. I am a disabled writer and a queer writer, and I think a lot of that winds up hemorrhaging into the worlds that I built. So yeah, that's who I am. Hi, Tim. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderfully. Especially after that. That's a great description of the gist. I mean, because I knew some of that stuff, but actually, you illuminated me just a little bit here too, because I read Tank, and that reminded me of like that Ghost in the Shell episode where where the kid and the robot tank hang out. But though that one is actually even darker than your story. Your story was nicer than that, and that was a pretty fun episode, pretty nice episode, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
For Ghost in the Shell, gosh, it's a pretty.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Tachikomas.
Yeah, Tachikomas.
Like the Tachikomas had to have had some like background radiation influence on me writing that story. Like it wasn't in my conscious mind, but my unconscious mind had to be. Like I want to hug because the Tachikomas are basically tanks that could hug you,
and they're like, and they have arms, and they're also like the voices of children, which is adorable and terrifying in the show because boing boing boing, bzz, machine gun go burr. Anyway, sorry. Definitely Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, people. If you want to know what we're talking about and you don't, check that out. That's your first plug for the show. But anyway, like, John. Yeah. Sorry, go on. You were saying.
No, I was just going to say it's like one of the few adaptations that I like better than the source material. Like the manga was way ahead of its time, but the storytelling of Standalone Complex is so ahead of its own time and ahead of its own source material. Characterization of people like Bato, and I always forget Bato's human partner, but just the characterization.
Togusa?
Yeah. Oh, I love him. Like when you think, I'm not going to spoil the show. When you think something bad happens to him, I was dying with him.
Yes, and he's like the most vulnerable character in the whole show because he's a full human guy, and he has a family and everything. You think legit, logically speaking, if anybody on the team is going down, it's going to be this guy. It's serious if he gets hit. Anyway, everyone else is a cyborg monster, basically, a killing machine. But or a tank, I mean, frankly, because there's a tank for each of them in the show. But it's a great show. I grew up with that show. It's amazing. It was right there when I was a teenager. I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm jumping on this Tachikoma, and I'm riding it out of town. Anyway, I love that show. But it's funny because even the movie, even the older movie, was also really good, and it's quite different from the source material. I've not read the manga, but from what I understand, is the manga is like it's just a jumping off point for all these great other media, which is really cool, fascinating. But anyway, more about you, less about.
Yes, right. But back when I wrote Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, I mean, John Wiswell, creator of Ghost in the Shell. Yeah, you're a little surprising, but anyway,
when I created Scarlett Johansson.
No, okay. We're not talking about that movie. That's a different thing.
All right, anyway. Yes, so...
I did see it, but whatever. Anyway.
All right, so yes, about writing.
Yes, about writing. So when you approach a short story, mind you, like one of these short stories with an unusual protagonist, I noticed, at least in Tank, there's a very minimal description of, say, the tank, which is pretty normal for a protagonist in a story a lot of the time, because the point of view character is like, I wouldn't describe myself except maybe the area that I can see, which is my beard mostly.
Exactly.
But who wants to know about that? Come on, you get used to it too. But other than that first couple of lines where it's like, well, gazing out from the furrow or the jungle of my face, I see the world, whatever other terrible writing I could do on the show out loud, whatever. Other than that, what do you approach a way to make those characters distinct? Because they are, like you say, they're very weird and they're very varied. They're unusual. Let me say, not weird. That's not a nice word.
Usually I'm writing unusual protagonist on an axis, and that axis goes from what do they take for granted and thus wouldn't mention, and will that interest the audience? They're the negative space is supposed to arouse the curiosity of the person. If I say the protagonist is a tank, and I mention that they have treads and they have a cannon, you have enough for you to be like, wait, this is an actual tank. This isn't a dude whose nickname is Tank. This is a real tank. What do you mean? And if I then give you another paragraph of description of what the tank looks like, your curiosity is sated. But if I give you just a few details and then the tank goes about its day, I'm telling you this story has promises about how you'll come to understand the tank, and I get to fill in detail. And at the other end of that axis, I feel, is what doesn't your protagonist take for granted? What is your protagonist interested in? Because that's what really defines it. So rather than giving you a detailed schematic for how to build or have your own die-cast version of my protagonist tank, I'm giving you, by the end of the story, the emotional landscape of their loneliness, their desire for companionship, what they look for in other people. And that then, over the course of filling in your understanding of what it is, gives you the sense of the stakes and the conflict there. So that's why I usually am kind of vague on. There was this one story, goodness, what was it called? Where I'm From, We Eat Our Parents. Is about a tentacle monster that's very nervous to meet its girlfriend's parents for the first time. And everybody else is human, but you can tell that your protagonist is just a squid that has been shoved into a cheap suit. And just the few opening details of it filling out the suit and feeling very nervous, and it feeling like the tie is two tentacles that it can't control. That tells you everything you need to know that this is weird. This story is going to be weird. And I think I picked some of that up from China Mieville, who's very good at putting the "Are you cool enough?" chapter in. Like early on in Perdido Street Station, the guy comes home and good. I feel like a good 2/3 of readers went, no, I'm done. Yeah. And 1/3 of readers, by China Mieville standards, were cool enough to keep
no, I'm in, is actually what he wants you to say at that point. This is great. Yes. Yeah. I liked that part. I found that book very difficult to read. I've tried a bunch of times to read it, but I loved the beginning. Or at least the part after the italics. I love the part where we actually got with the characters. Once we got there, I was like, yes. I'm in. And it's just a hard one to read after 150 pages. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I just start over, which is kind of funny. Maybe I'm not cool enough to get 180 pages into Perdido Street Station, but I liked a lot of it. There's a lot to like there. Let me put it that way.
He is a more deliberately inaccessible writer than I am.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say so.
And the deliberate inaccessibility is a style factor for him. Like he wants it to be that way. Makes his accomplishments with that. I really strive and have worked for the last decade to try to hone my prose style so that my really strange thoughts and my strange characters and my strange themes or unusual themes can be digestible to a contemporary audience and as wide an audience as I can. For the longest time, I was like a bad Mieville and a bad Tolkien, way too much vocabulary for my story. There's no point to purple it out the way that I did in 2010. Whereas now I've tried to hone the way that I offer something unusual to an audience, and it seems like it's working, which is nice. but it's very hard to teach yourself, because my native storytelling method had so little plot and so little character motivation, and it would just go wherever I wanted it, which is fun as heck if it's just you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to sell that to somebody, or if you want to like entertain somebody else, you have to have some compassion for your reader.
That's a good word, honestly, compassion. But I did want to mention one other thing before we move on from the unusual characters, because the squid guy, the tentacle monster, reminded me very much of, especially with the way you put it, of this Jonathan Colton song, "I Crush Everything." Also, and it actually sounds a lot like one of your stories, because he basically never says the protagonist is a squid, but but the protagonist, the speaker of the song, is describing parts of himself.
Yeah.
And he doesn't say tentacles; he says arms. But then he describes I hate my beak, or like by the sunlight filters down to my giant yellow eye. I'm like, okay, you're a squid, dude. You're definitely a giant squid at this point. But like, yeah, or I mean, the fact that he's also talking about dolphins and boats and stuff. Like, okay, this is obviously a squid. He never has to say it though in the song, so it seems like a similar kind of concept there.
My favorite ploy with a weird protagonist is, did you ever read Kurt Vonnegut's Galapagos?
No, I should probably though. I'm beginning to think like now. I'm going to be caught off guard here. Go on.
That's fine. I'll keep it tame. But it's post-apocalypse. The world has flooded. It seems like humans are being hunted by killer whales, which tells you, like, okay, the world's very different than I remember. This is messed up,
man. Oh no, they don't even eat people.
And the narrator protagonist doesn't seem to be floating around. Has sometimes omniscient knowledge and sometimes limited knowledge, and sometimes they're narrative. Sometimes they have very grounded experiences, and such that you are left being like, who the hell is telling me this story? Like, is this a ghost? Are these aliens that have just made first contact on Earth? And the fun of the story is you need to wait, you need to read about 200 to 250 pages before Vonnegut will tell you who's telling you the story.
Oh, and that is cool.
He plays with you the whole time. That blew my mind when I was like, oh, you could do that much with a narrator. Okay.
Yeah.
And I reread the whole book, diagramming it. And he has other books that are much more famous and they do great things. But I feel like if you love strange writer tricks and achievements of the English language, that one is a must read. It's called Galapagos.
Okay, Galapagos. Kurt Vonnegut. People, you heard it. Also, I heard it, and it reminds me of, like, I could kind of use something that's less problematic than what the one Orson Scott Card book, which did something similar that I read. Because because Card's such a problematic writer, and this book is the most problematic thing I've ever seen of his. Honestly,
wow,
it's content warning, people. I think I mentioned it before, but it's called Heart's Hope, and I read it because when I was a teenager, I read his books about writing, and he mentioned this book, and it is a fantasy novel that is extremely brutal and dark, but it's also it also is a book that is told in the second person, and you are a character in the book. You don't know who you are, though, until the very last sentence. Fascinating, but totally insane. And also, again, can't recommend, but very interesting from a writerly perspective. Can't recommend, but very interesting. So I know I hate to have to give those caveats because I used to love Card's work. I still love some of his stories, but that one is definitely problematic in the extreme. So anyway, and again, tough author to like. But there's, especially considering all the eggs he laid, even just in fiction. So anyway, I hate being the guy who criticizes other authors, but I do it anyway. Here we are. We accept ourselves. Anyway, we're not doing any more of that right now. Sorry.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. Back to John, who I don't feel like criticizing just yet. No, I'm just kidding. That's not going to happen either. We're just goofing here. Okay. So
yeah.
So John, you've got a bunch of short stories out there. Do you have any novels in your mind? Do you want to write longer fiction, or are you mostly a short guy?
You happy with that? I am working on a novel actually. Like up until we did this call, I'm in the back third of a novel. I love novels. I originally thought that I was just going to be a novelist, and then I fell down the short story hole 15 years ago. And I love that form. And it turned out there was more stuff being done there than I expected. And the further I got in, the more I found there were writers that were trying to do different things with a short story that spoke more to what I wanted to see in the world. There was a very long period where the science fiction and fantasy short story was defined either by some like heroic quest, which is for my reading desires, okay, after about like 6 stories, I've had enough of those. And then there was the like, how can this end badly? How can this be as miserable as possible? And those I ran out of patience for very, very rapidly. Whether it's a dystopia or it's a narrative where somebody has some emotional attachment and then just things go wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's that with the chronic illness that I've dealt with and the traumas that I've experienced in life, and that I work as a counselor for disabled youths, and that I am, for multiple identities, marginalized. I just have enough suffering in my life that I don't have much patience for fiction that only wants to add suffering, that doesn't have something more to give. But I thought that was all short fiction was when I first tried to break into science fiction and fantasy writing. As I've had a career, different-minded writers and different kinds of stories have blossomed around me, whether it was Mary Robina Kowal or Veena Jimin Prasad. I'll admit that, like, fandom for robots by Veena Prasad was a sea change story for me, where I was like, oh my God, the whole story could really be just about an AI that really wants to connect with people and make them happy. Merc Fenn-Wolfmore's story, It Me All, which is just about a bot that is trying to get people to hydrate more because it knows that people aren't regulating their emotions correctly. And if they would just drink more water, they would be able to handle problems more regularly, which is a real world problem. It was so lovely to see fiction like that spinning out. And a lot of the works of Marissa Lingen are like that as well. And I realized that the stuff that I thought that I couldn't do because nobody would want to publish it was actually feasible. And it inspired me to go down to go further down the short story rabbit hole and get weirder, but get warmer hearted. Yeah. It's not hope punk. It's not, it does have my political biases for sure. But what it has at its heart is that compassion and the desire to help people should be normalized, should not just be extraordinary. And that, I feel, is more common in short fiction than ever. And so I probably will never leave short fiction if I can help it. In fact, as soon as I finish this book, I have a queue of 9 short stories. I'm looking at them right now. Some of them need one more draft before I can submit them. Some of them are 2 paragraphs long right now and need to be written. And I am totally excited to finish the novel, dive into them, finish those 9, then go revise this novel and submit it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So it's going to be part of my, it's got to be part of my process.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your take on shorts, Tim?
Oh, I mean, I'm not actually a big short story writer. I didn't read them much growing up, honestly. For some of the same reasons you suggested, perhaps, but also because, I mean, I think we're probably a generation different, but, or at least a few years different anyway, in age. So I didn't grow up with, the short stories of science fiction, really. I read some old pulp ones back that they had in the Catholic school library. I found some of those when I was a kid. But, which is in small town Minnesota, and I'm in the Catholic school's library, and I'm reading, I forget even the name of the book, but it involved people with super sight and weird. It was definitely pulp fiction. It was an old sci-fi pulp collection or something. But I don't read a lot of short stories. In fact, probably the weirdest, I would say the weirdest and biggest example of short stories that I've read is actually Water Margin, and some people call that a novel. That's the old Chinese novel, one of the oldest books ever written that we still have in that form. But it really is a bunch of interconnected short stories about the same characters, which is kind of funny. And they run into each other and stuff. Like the one about the monk was really funny. But I've only written a handful of short stories, which is very sad to me now, because I do want to write more short fiction, and I have ADHD. Literally. So I want to jump around between stories all the time. And I need to find a way to do that. But as an indie author as well, I do have to reckon with writing novels at almost the same pace as traditional authors write short stories. So, there's I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Dean Wesley Smith. My audience probably is at this point. But Dean Wesley Smith has this thing I think it was him or Christine Catherine Rush. I get those two conflated. I mean, they are partners. But anyway, and their blog, I think it was actually, but I think it was Dean who wrote about pulp speed, the different pulp speeds, like warp speed. And but his top was like pulp speed 5 or whatever, which is 2 million words a year. Or something, maybe that was 6.
Whew.
But
that is faster than me.
Well, I mean, it's incredibly fast. It's faster than Dean, I believe, as well. I think he said he wasn't that fast either. It was just a benchmark. That was just the top of the scale. But and I don't want to make, and no one should feel bad about this. But even after I switched back from dictation, I was dictating novels, and I can dictate about twice as fast as I can type. But even now, switching back, and actually, though it's less efficient in the end because editing is a bear with that. I'm switching back to I've switched back to typing, but when I switched back, I discovered I was twice as fast at typing as I was before I started dictating. Weirdly, not. I mean, so I used to. Okay, so let me do the math here for you. I used to write like 1,500 words an hour. I was just doing ballparks before 1,500 words an hour, but I could dictate 6,000 or 7,000 words an hour. Now I can type 2,500 words an hour, pretty easily. 2,400, something like that. Not quite 2,500. That's like that's the upper end. So, okay. and it's much cleaner than the dictation, so it's actually more efficient, much more efficient to do that. But it means that and because I do this full time, other than the podcast, I could probably hit pulp speed 7 or something like that, 2.2 million or 2.4 million, something like that this year, and I've already wasted 3 months, mind you. Mostly for me. I haven't used the time very well. So I've only written the one book this year, and that's pretty short for me. And also half of that was already written last year. Anyway, so and that book just came out, but it was also half of it had been dictated. So the editing again was a beast of a process. It was horrible because I'm such a sloppy dictator. I mean, it just goes to show why dictatorship is wrong. Anyway, at least for me. I'm in favor of democracy. Also, typing. So anyway, I did a whole episode. Actually, I should plug this too while I'm here. I did a whole episode on J. Daniel Sawyer's podcast, The Everyday Novelist, about this, about why I switched back to typing. So people should go check that out if they have the chance. I'm not good at plugging podcasts, but there you go. Go do it. It's a great episode. If you like me, you'll like that. Anyway, it has a lot of me in it. So anyway, but back to your question, John. Short fiction. I've been babbling a little much. I think I had too much coffee today. But anyway, the issue I have with short fiction, again, is partially market, but it's also, I mean, I have a few short stories out there that I enjoyed a lot. Writing, I created some settings in short stories that I've never touched again, but I'm a setting guy. I like my weird fantasy settings, my weird science fiction settings, and I find it difficult to write short fiction that explores settings to that extent. To the extent that I want to, that kind of takes a holistic approach and it shows you all the nooks and crannies. So that's one reason I always write novels, basically, for the most part, or I write in a series that includes short stories and novels. Though, I mean, I think my only setting that I've just the short story in is probably the Drowning World or whatever, which is also actually weirdly, she mentioned Galapagos earlier, is a drowned Earth story. It's Who Drowned the Earth is the name of the short story, and it was in a collection called After the End or something like that. Oh, I forget what it's called. It's a post-apocalyptic anthology, indie anthology, and it was. You know, I don't know. I don't know how good the story is because I dictated it again, and it's rough. It was rough, and I rushed it out. But I really like that setting. It is basically merfolk versus the remaining humans on an Earth that's been flooded, like way more than even global climate change would do. And so there's a question as to where all that water came from. So anyway, which is cool. So it's divers and stuff, often fighting merfolk. I'm an action-oriented guy. I think we write very different kinds of stories, you and I. But we're like, okay, it's about a crew on a nice little boat. They go around, they dive, and there are harpoon guns. Anyway,
sweet.
Yes. I don't think I didn't go with the underwater rifle, which is, a real thing that the Soviet Union invented, but not very good, actually. You better get a spear gun. Anyway, if you actually want to do any business underwater, get a spear gun. So anyway, from my research anyway. So John, I've gone on a little much, so I'm gonna give you back some extra time because normally we're gonna go a little long today, folks. So not terribly, but I'm gonna punch it up a little bit. So I want to ask you one more question before we get to the reading section. Is your your idea of compassion obviously informs your writing a lot. Do you have can you define the kind of compassion? Is it compassion for your characters? What kind of compassion are you trying to delve into here? If it's specific, more specific than that,
Yeah, I could try to give you the specifics. It's not a singular compassion. Obviously, most stories are going to make you sympathetic or at least interested in a protagonist if they are successful. A failed story is usually you couldn't make the audience care about anybody. The easiest way to make an audience care is to make a character sympathetic. It's not the only thing you could do, but it's a thing you could do, and it's a thing that I tend to explore, particularly for people or identities that I wish were more sympathized with by large groups of people. Later this year, I'm publishing my first story about an asexual character. I am asexual. I've dealt with a lot of aphobia in my life, and it took me a long time to kind of muster up the will to write about some of my own lived experience. But there are other kinds of compassion, and the normalized compassion that I was referencing earlier is not just taking for granted that the audience who reads beyond the first paragraph should care about whoever we're talking about, is that characters will care about each other, perhaps beyond their own boundaries and concerns. That's altruistic compassion. However, altruism is often taken to its hyperbolic extreme of "I'll die so you'll live," which science fiction's already covered that, right? Spock will jump out of the air thing, and now Kirk's alive and sad. What I'm really interested in is what we do with each other when we have to live with each other. What is the compassion like that keeps us able to keep going together, whether it is a strange couple that you wouldn't normally expect, or a found family that winds up helping each other through traumas that push them away from their original environments. Those kinds of compassion, the ability to make space for others, the willingness to step into conflicts that aren't yours, not necessarily violently, not necessarily with the harpoon gun, sometimes with the harpoon gun, are very interesting to me. I mean, sometimes there will be humorously implied violence, because some of my stories are quite violent indeed. But like, there are also just goofy violent uses of violence to resolve conflict. You read Tank. You remember when the lady is being bullied by the guy in the Red Hood t-shirt, and the tank just rolls up, points their cannon right at the guy's chest. It's not going to fire. It's definitely, we already know the cannon can't fire, but just the implication of the cannon pointing right at him is enough for like a laugh and to pull down the tone, and then to show compassion to the lady who's being bullied and offer the beginning of a friendship between the tank and the lady who's being bullied. So that's a kind of compassion, the desire to be good even to a stranger.
Yeah. Heroism in that regard, kind of. Yeah.
Oh, sure. I mean,
but, example.
Yeah, I mean, often friendship is everyday heroism.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I mean, I look at my local fire department. I have nothing but admiration for them. And so, yeah, that's sort of what I try to explore in the mega space of theme. In the more intimate space, I mean, I just think it's really cool if the kaiju has a best friend that's like a sentient balloon. I just think that's funny. I really like that idea. It's very cute to me. I want it. You know, I love dorky friendships. I love dorky queer platonic bonds. So, you know, like if it's possible for the werewolf to become friends with an astronaut and they both go live on the moon, I'll probably write it. That's where I come from.
I mean, if that wasn't a John Wiswell story, that sounds kind of like a Murg Lafferty story, except hers would involve some more murder, probably. Anyway, just her style. I'm partially colored because I loved that. Was it Marco and the Red Granny? That story she had serialized a few years ago now, quite a while ago now. But I love that one. That was amazing. Anyway, so there's my plug. I guess another plug for someone else's story here. Anyway, yeah. So no, that's awesome. I love the way you expressed that. I think that was very powerful because it actually the way, you know, like it was like Kingdom of Heaven. It's like I'd rather live with people than kill them. This is the gist of the one line. Like that is a pretty important message. I'd say it's especially vital these days, but always and it's something that it can't. I hope it doesn't go out of style anytime soon. I'm glad there's people out there telling those stories, because it's not the kind of thing I do, and I might not ever do it, but I'm glad they were out there. I'm glad guys like you, people like you, were out there writing that kind of story, because we need it. We need it, folks. Anyway,
it takes all kinds.
Exactly. And it's kind of funny though, because when you to go back to that tentacle monster story again, though. It's funny because I actually just wrote a tentacle monster book. It involves tentacle monsters. They're also kind of like incubi. Like they're monsters. They're really mean. They're kind of like vampires that are also tentacle freaks. And one of them ends up becoming basically a medieval mech pilot. It's a very weird book. But he has a walking castle that he controls.
Sweet.
And of course, but because it's me, and this is where it becomes less like one of your stories, is that guy actually is the villain. And it's like, okay, he's the villain. I have a lot of compassion for him. I like the character a lot. I like the other characters in that arc, in that storyline a lot. But this is an epic fantasy, and he can't be the hero, or he could have been. But I didn't shoot him as the hero, to put it that way.
Right.
I didn't put him in that role because I guess I just had other characters already in mind. It was also the third book in a series. It's hard to introduce a hero who's also controlling a walking castle when you already have two heroes that readers like very much and are trying to write from previous books. Anyway, I just released this book. It's called Well Country. It just came out on Easter, and it's again Plug City. We're going to do the plug throughout. How about we just say that now?
Yeah. So anyway, Plugathon.
Yeah, Plugathon. This is a special. This is the John Wiswell special issue Plugathon. That sounds kind of bad now, actually. Whatever. It's a Plugathon, and this book is. I'm very proud of it, but I was a little disappointed that he ended up being such a villain at the end of the story. Like he ended up being basically a bad guy the entire book. And I really kind of. I mean, he didn't die though. Maybe I'll be able to redeem him later.
Yeah. It's difficult with incubi. With incubi and succubi, if you've got a sex predator, it's tough.
It's very difficult. That's why he ended up being a villain, I think. Actually,
I've only written one incubi succubi story where naturally the succubus goes on a diet. Right?
Yeah, it's gotta do it. Yeah.
It's just like, oh god, it's basically vegan succubus.
That's great too. That's an awesome idea. Come on.
Yeah, but that's the difference between us. And when I say that this is what I want to write, that doesn't mean that's all that I want to exist in the world, because I probably haven't come across it as it in this podcast so far. I'm a horror junkie. I watch slasher movies and stuff constantly. I watched Kong vs. Godzilla twice. It's just not what I produce.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. It's kind of the reverse for me. Yeah.
Yeah, like we take in what inspires us, but you don't have to put out what you take in. You put out what you're good at putting out.
That's also a good lesson, and I think every writer should take note of that. Just because you like, they say write what you know or write what you like, but even that is kind of not sufficient to describe what writers should do. Writers should do what they want to do. That's the gist of it. They should write what they want to write. No, and that goes for every one of us. I think you should write the sort of stories you want to see out there if they don't exist already. But if the sort of stories you like are being produced and you want to write them anyway, do that. Do the thing that makes you like writing. Is actually basically my lesson for the year so far. Because when I say I want to do pulp speed, it's like I don't want to just sit here and I'm not going to be bored writing 2.2 million words or whatever. In a year, writing 22 novels. Like, I could do that. It doesn't sound that hard it does sound hard, mind you, but it doesn't sound impossible if you like every book. If you like those books and you think they're important, and not in that cringy, oh, this is so important, it has to be perfect way, but in the sort of, I want people to read this way. Then you can do that kind of thing, and anyone can do that kind of thing if they have the time, mind you. Time is also a limiting factor, time and energy, limiting factors. But you can create the sort of fiction you want to create. Maybe not in the volume. Volume is not guaranteed. Let me put it that way. But it's also possible to do a lot more than you think you can do. So anyway, that's one to grow on, folks. Yep. Anyway, John, it's been great having you. And we are a little late. I did ramble a lot. I'm sorry about that. And genuinely sorry, unlike my usual fake apologies.
It's all good, man. This has been fun.
Oh, great. I'm glad you had fun. But we have one more round. The reading round, John. What do you...
Plugathon.
The Plugathon continues. Yes, and this time, it's your turn. What are some of your favorite things you would plug lately, especially fiction and that zone?
Sure. So I just finished Scott Hawkins's The Library at Mount Char, which I wouldn't be surprised if it's come up on this podcast before. It was a very popular book a few years ago. I'm just late. I'm always late.
I'm even later than you. I never heard of it.
It's absolutely mesmerizing. It has an ending like I've really not read in a English language novel before. It is a mix of two stories that bang into each other. One is basically the demigods of the universe find that their father has gone missing, not just from now, but from all time and all space. They can't find him. And now they are looking for him, and they are vicious. They are not like funny, bumbling demigods. They are uprooting the laws of physics, trying to find out where father went. The other half of the story is from the point of view of the lovingly, authentically created humans who are completely screwed over by these gods wrecking the universe. And it is these humans who are mired in their family relationships, and one of them who's like just come back from service in war, very small scale human lives, completely upset by the presence of these demigods who are just uprooting the timeline. And these humans are slowly coming together, trying to put together the notes to figure out what the hell is happening. Because none of them are alone, and they increasingly realize that they've all had these strange experiences. And they, you suspect, may figure out what happened to father before the gods do.
It sounds amazing. Could you say the title again?
Yes, it is The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. Okay. I'm pretty sure that's his name. I have my copy in the other room. It is awesome. Like the end, I just really haven't read a book that made good on the promises both of the humans and the demigods like that before. And I totally understand why this poor man is being harassed for a second book. It doesn't end on a cliffhanger. He doesn't owe you a sequel. And yet, I would really like that guy to give me another book right now. You're a different guy. I would really like to read whatever that is.
Best possible results. Come on.
Yeah, right. Because it's a standalone. You don't feel like you're on the hook. But whatever he made next, I'd read it. And then, since I'm the short story guy, I just figured I'd also plug a few short pieces of fiction that are out there. One is by Vanessa Fogg in Translunar Travelers Lounge magazine. I knew I had to write that down. Translunar Travelers Lounge magazine, a free-to-read magazine on the internet at translunartravelerslounge.com. And they published a story by Vanessa Fogg called Fan Fiction for a Grim Dark Universe. And it is the story of like space marines going through their grim dark end times, and they stumble upon what appears to be reams and reams of fan fiction from a parallel universe that is writing about them as though they are being watched on a TV show.
Oh, and hell yeah.
All these space marines are like, wait a minute, what is a bakery shop AU? What the hell? And they're just going through it being like, apparently there's like there's 200,000 words of if we were in something called high school. What is this? It's so great. It's such a clever, it's such a clever use of the short form to concisely show you both what texts mean to us and what fan fiction means to us. And it really binds the strengths of both together beautifully, and that's by Vanessa Fogg. Again, that one's called Fan Fiction for a Grimdark Universe. And then this morning, I also read Man vs. Bomb by M. Shaw. Perfect title. Who doesn't want to know the outcome of Man vs. Bomb?
It's cracking me up right now. That doesn't sound like a happy ending. Let me put it that way.
No, I would not say. It is in, I think it's the newest issue of Fantasy Magazine, which is fantasy-magazine.com. Again, you can read that one for free. I think there might even be an audio version that's for free.
Cool. Podcast fiction, yeah.
Yeah. It starts as a man is being chased by a bomb, which is an absurd conceit. But the longer the chase goes, the more you are led to question what if this is really a human man? And if not, like, what exactly is he? You're questioning this on a biological level as the details of the story spool out. And then further, what exactly the thing that he thinks is a bomb is that's chasing him. And it questions the identity of both of these in such clever ways that I will not spoil.
Oh,
anyway,
man. Okay.
That's Man vs. Bomb by M. Shaw. fantastic short story. So those are my plugs.
No, those are great plugs, sir. You really made them count.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
I gotta do the Plugathon justice.
Yeah, exactly. Rack them. We got those plugs in. So anyway, ding, ding, ding. Okay, so people, it's been great. John, tell people where they can find your work now.
All right.
Out there on the internet.
If you want to read me, if you want to find me, the fastest, easiest way is on Twitter, where I am at Wiswell. Just literally my last name, Wiswell. You can also find me on at johnwiswell.blogspot.com. I have ye old blog that I keep updated with every story that I publish. I had 3 stories come out in March. I have 1 or 2 coming out in April. The most recent story I had published was We Are Not Phoenixes in Fireside Magazine, which is sort of about what fantasy and magic do for the hospice industry. And it's an extreme of compassion. I'll say that. I'll leave that on. And then in a couple of weeks, I'll have another story out at Diabolical Plots called For Lack of a Bed, about a sofa that just turns out to be very bad furniture.
Okay.
I'll just say very bad.
Okay,
furniture.
so very nasty sofa. Got it.
Yeah, it's a nasty sofa.
Very
That's
unpleasant
right, yeah.
sofa. We don't want that.
Yeah.
We should read the story, folks. Yeah, people.
I would recommend it.
Go find it when it comes out.
Yeah. And I'll keep people updated via both my blog and my Twitter.
Well, wonderful. Yeah, it says killing it again. You got a lot of stuff coming out, and it's always great to hear people, publishing. And it doesn't matter what form it takes. It's all good stuff, and killing it. # killing it. John Wiswell.
Thanks, man.
All right, thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun. And as for this podcast, you can find us at mentalcellarpublications.com. That's a mental basement. Mental Cellar. CELLAR publications.com. And you can find me at timneedawriter.com, because my last name is Needawriter, but you can also say it Need a Writer, and that is probably the easier one to spell. You can find it, all my other stuff's linked from that site. That includes my blog, which is still got that obnoxious WordPress title because I started it years ago, dwellerofthedeep.wordpress.com. I don't plug that one enough because it is actually one of the places I post the most when I post blog posts. And then I'm on Twitter, of course, but you don't need to know about that. No, at tneedwriter on Twitter. And, of course, I have my books out. And the new one's out. It's Well Country. I mentioned it earlier. It's on Amazon.com. And you can get the print book. Soon you'll be able to get the print book everywhere, but right now it's just on Amazon. It's just publishing it all over the interweb. And you can get that print on demand, as well as all the other books in the Demon Hunter series, the Forces of Empires series, many other series that I have out there, mind you. Too many series, not enough books. Let me put it that way. Thanks for listening, people. Stay safe out there. And I'll talk to you again on Sunday. But for now, it's good. Take it easy. And yeah, I said stay safe already. Gosh. All right. Bye.
That tears it.